what you felt went as you had planned, and what are some things that you're thinking about for next steps in your next lesson?
Well, the order of everything was fine. I think I need to put some more time constraints on them. These are the kids who kind of get a little silly if I don't put those time constraints. And they tend to want to give silly answers sometimes, so it's like a fine balance of like giving them enough time to verbalize it and prodding them to verbalize answers, but yet not giving them so much time that they get a little weird and a little bit silly. So
how much is 8th gradeness and how much is taskness?
Yes.
So it's a fine
line. But I love the topic was really good because they're always talking about celebrities and did I see this and did I see that. We talk about Marvel movies all the time. So I loved The Blast. Was perfect for this because it talks about a movie that they've seen and from a perspective of not just liking it but like the impact that it has. So.
Absolutely.
So
I love that. I love that that there was something. The second read, I got something more. I was like, oh, the comment about Africa being a place that people want to go, rather than just being a kind of a place people don't want to go.
Yeah.
My personal favorite line was Miss Haushalter, when I said, "Why'd you put Anne Frank in the middle?" And one of the boys said, "Miss Haushalter, she is dead." Like, oh, okay. Yeah, and your response, like, I could put other dead people there.
Yeah, I could.
No, she died. That's what it was.
She died.
She died.
Well, and the assumption that because we die, we automatically are
You're
like
good.
positive.
I know. That's what I loved about it. I'm like, she died. Therefore, she cannot be in the neutral column. She has to be in the positive.
And it's not even like I put her in the negative column.
No,
I
exactly.
put her in the neutral.
I was dying. I was like, that's such 8th grade logic. Miss Haushalter,
this class likes to call me out and like set me straight often.
But you had a nice feeling tone with them, and you had a nice balance of, your, as you said, 8th gradeness and on taskness, which is always.
And I think that mine are the level 5 ELDs, and that's probably one of my biggest struggles, is because they're level 5. Many of them have said, well, I only speak English, or all I've ever spoken was English. And so sometimes they're confused why they're in ELD, and they're confused at how this is helping them. And so they tend to get a little silly because to them it's like, why am I even in this class? I don't need it. It's not my English class, not my core class. And so I have to really work hard with classroom management and making sure they understand the value of what they're learning, and just like that. And I have even talked to them about that register, that how we talk to each other, the way you talk in the quad is not the same you would talk to in a classroom to a teacher or when you're presenting and stuff. And so I have to. That's one of my biggest struggles, is keeping them on task and keeping them engaged in something that, honestly, they decided a long time ago was kind of pointless.
And that focus on writing, I think, is so important when you have kids who are right there on the cusp. Is really it's their writing that's keeping them from moving. And necessarily their reading as well, because if you don't read well, you don't write well. But I thought that was really important. And you talked about timing things, so that way you could get to this summary and you would have a quick assessment.
And I do have, I have a couple students who definitely need that more time. I have a couple who are not just ELD students, but have 504s for hearing. I think I have 2 who are hard of hearing, and a couple other things going on that I have to accommodate. And so I think sometimes some of their language is not necessarily ELD related, but related to whatever other issue that is going on. And so I have to make sure, they might need extra time to listen, whereas the other kids are racing through, and they've got all 3 reads. I'm like, I've only read it twice. And
Exactly. They were already writing. I noticed that the little girl up front. But what I said to,
which is fine, so they can pick up information quicker.
And that's okay.
And so it's always kind of a balance of making sure the ones who need that extra time get it, and then the ones who are quicker don't get bored and start being silly, and stay engaged.
And that's always a fine line. What I commented to Mr. Johnson that it's so interesting because you have the little girl up front who's like, I'm doing all 3 of these. Like she's on the first read, but I'm going in. And then you had a girl closer back to us who kind of paused and she didn't look off task, but she was kind of thinking. and then she kind of touched her computer, and then she wrote.
Yeah.
But it was good writing.
Yeah.
And so it just reminds me, and I commented to Steve about that we all work at a different pace.
Yeah.
For some people, they do a lot of thinking, and then they just put pen to paper and
Right.
they write. Whereas I tend to write and
Yeah.
revise and edit, but being tolerant of that, right? And you're right, being engaging enough that you don't lose the girl in the front.
Right.
But what I thought was powerful about the 3 reads was the second read, I got something I hadn't heard before.
Yeah.
Just because I was listening for something different. I was listening to
Yeah.
who it was about.
Yeah.
And that made me listen to that quote from Lupita Nyong'o or
And
what
I think
she said.
that's what they struggle with a lot, ELD students, is that when they're only read something once, even if they're reading it themselves, they're still trying to decode things, and then words that are not necessarily, they tend to rely on their slang and their everyday register of language. And so if they're not ever having to practice that academic language, then the first read through something, they're probably not gonna get
it's
it.
It's a fluency read, right?
They're just listening to somebody read fluently. They're just trying to figure out, okay, what do those words mean? Because there were some words in there I'm like, oh, and I read them, and they're not
just
gonna
like,
know
I'm
what those mean.
through that.
Yeah,
that's
and
just
so
the way it's gonna be.
yeah, and so then the second read, that's why I told them, go ahead, if you didn't think of anything the first time I read it, go back. Now you have 2 things to read.
And I love that.
I'm sorry, 2 things to listen for.
Yeah, you're not off the hook.
Yeah, you don't get to just skip right
back. I love that.
Yeah, that they have to, listen to it again. And so for those ones who need a little more time to process what I'm saying and what I'm reading. And I think that's where they struggle in other classes is things are only read one time or they only have that short time to get something done. And so some of their understanding of things and critical thinking of what they're reading, it's a little bit easier for than when it's read 3 times. And I'm actually, even though it's supposed to be in one setting, I'm actually really glad we ran out of time today, because then they get to sit with that first 2 reads overnight. And they may not cognitively actively think about it. They're not going to go home and be like, Miss Haushalter, I love that thing she read.
I'm going to really think about Anne Frank.
Yeah.
She died.
I'm
died,
sure they're going to give me a comment
middle,
about it tomorrow. When you're gone, they'll let
Miss
the truth will
Haushalter,
come out
she
tomorrow.
died. That was like that was the high point of my week.
Blasphemy for a teacher.
Right,
to
and it's just it's so 8th grade, right?
Yes.
I'm like, this is why I love 14-year-olds, because it's like, you can't put her in the middle column.
Yeah, how dare I? And I'm a teacher, and I put her in the middle column.
Oh, so wrong.
So I actually think, though, they'll come back, let those first 2 reads kind of settle a little bit, and then come back tomorrow and they'll understand it so much better for the third one.
Well, and I commented to the video while you were teaching that when you give kids something interesting to think about, and they go more deeply, that DOK, and they go more deeply in the DOK, their language necessarily becomes more sophisticated, because they have to say things like, well, I don't know if that's true, or the Anne Frank, I love that she was in the middle, because they were like a little bit scandalized by that. She died in the Holocaust, like she's got to be positive.
Yeah.
But that, she was disrespectful. Oh, okay. And you think about that rich vocabulary that we have to use when we say things like disrespectful and she wasn't kind to her mother. The way you have to string that together to do that thinking. So it's one of the things that it's one of my favorite quotes is confusion breeds critical thinking. So that disequilibrium that we have when we were like, Anne Frank's in the middle. I mean, that's why I asked about it. Like, I don't know. Like, you may not be okay in teacher. You may go to teacher prison.
I know.
Putting Anne Frank in the middle, and that
you can't post that part.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Don't put that on Facebook. Oh my Lord.
I hope you're tenured, Kara. You're out of the English teacher club. But what I loved was their conversation surrounding that, and rice gum. Oh my goodness, I have no idea who that is.
I have no idea who half those people are on that list. So.
But I love that they were like, he's not, Well, Kanye West was good before Twitter. I mean, like, just like the language, but the thinking of that, and I mean,
I'm always a little bit surprised by their thinking of things like that. Especially when you ask them about things like that influence them and why, like the fact they think there's nothing wrong with Michael Jackson, and I could give you a list of things that I'm not going to talk about with
but
students.
he died.
But he died, so I think
and
that's why.
There really is. I mean, it was like that. once we heard about Anne Frank, then Michael Jackson made more sense. Like, oh, he died in his hospital.
Yes.
You can't put him
yes.
anywhere but
well,
positive.
and you know, we know information about Michael Jackson
that they don't
from
know.
the news that they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
it's all about, you know, what do you know when you, what do you actually not know? And I think when they're in junior high, you know, this is such a fun thing to do because they don't always hear the news, you know, and they live in the information is always in front of them, but it's not always the most comprehensive information.
Right.
So
yeah, you're gathering.
It's funny to see why they think certain things, and
your news source maybe it's a 14-year-old's lens.
I think
too.
we need to revisit the reliable news sources.
Right, absolutely. Well, it was totally fun, and I mean, it really is all about me having. No, it's not just about me having fun, but it was really neat to see how you really kept the language academic. I loved your plan. I loved the 3 reads, and there was a lot of LPAC. I'll address this to the folks who are watching. A lot of the LPAC is listening to academic conversation, taking notes. Whether it's someone talking, as you did, and then taking notes from that, and then being able to talk about it, or listening to 2 people talk, and then being able to respond to that. Right. So lots of LPAC in there too. So thank you, Kara, for letting us be in your room. I was very impressed with the little girl in the front row and knew how to spell Haushalter. Super impressive.
I know. Like, A+ for her.
Yeah, that just happened. So.
She graduates.
right, exactly. We will see you on the stage in a couple.
That should be like a requirement for graduating.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you can't, you're out. So, well, thank you, Kara.
You're welcome.
It was fun being in your room.